如果你在一个不说英文的教室，你听得懂吗? If you were in a classroom where you were being taught in another language, would you understand and do well? This is a situation that students learning English as a second language face every day. But the closest that most of us get to this experience is studying abroad. A few months ago, I studied abroad in China and ended up picking up a second major in Mandarin Chinese. While I was there were definitely some times when I didn't understand what people were saying, and many more where they didn't understand me. But it was a beneficial experience because it gave me more insight as to what it might be like for a student learning English as a second language in America. While I was there, I tutored a 6th grade Chinese student in English. As an art education major, I was very excited for this opportunity because it's not every day that we get to work with students outside of the art classroom. But I was also a little nervous. I had worked with a student who was learning English as a second language in the past, but that was in an art classroom, not in a language setting. This was going to be different, but I was determined to do well. Excited, I packed up my limited Mandarin ability and took a taxi on over to my student's house, where the girl's mother, Mrs. Dai, met me at the gate for the first time. When I first met my student, I introduced myself to her in English because her mother had said that she already knew some. Hi, what's your name? She said nothing. I tried asking her a few other questions in English, hoping that maybe she would respond. But no. Her mom was still in the room, and I was starting to panic. How could I tutor her if I couldn't even get her to talk to me? Finally, I introduced myself to her in Chinese, hoping that maybe she would respond. I asked her what her name was. Coco was all she said. But she had talked, and that was enough for me. I continued on with the lesson, but she seemed a bit hesitant to participate. I didn't understand. Why was she being so shy? After her mom left the room, she seemed a bit more willing to participate. I found out that she had lived in California for 2 years. So she had a pretty wide knowledge of English, but she did have some trouble with forming full sentences. For example, I asked her to name as many animals in English as she could. Cat, dog, alligator, leopard, cheetah, elephant, frog. The list went on as she listed off at least 20 animals just from memory. Clearly, she knew English, but more within the confines of a textbook rather than the colloquial English that we would use every day. Also, she seemed to think of her lessons as a bit of a burden, and sometimes I couldn't tell if she was just sassing me by not responding, or if she genuinely didn't understand me. It was really frustrating, but how could I get through to her? I asked her what some of her interests were, hoping that maybe this would help. Nothing, she said. Nothing? Not reading or drawing or maybe playing with your friends? No, she told me that none of these piqued her interest. Later that evening, I was talking to her mother after dinner, as she asked me about Coco's progress and started telling me a bit more about her daughter. She showed me some of her daughter's drawings, saying that Coco loved to draw. What? I was surprised, but the next time I came for the English lesson, I came armed with even more activities to do, including one that I was sure that she would like. Pictionary. I would draw a vocabulary word on the board, describing it, while she would have to guess what the object was. And after that, we would switch. At first, she seemed like she wasn't too interested in the lesson. But later, when I was drawing the objects on the board, she would come up and draw them too, just because she wanted to learn how to draw them. When I first started teaching Coco, she hadn't spoken at all. By the time I left to go back to America, 2 months later, she was speaking in full sentences and asking questions, even though we only met once a week. But how could art make such a difference in her ability to learn and understand the material? I have a few theories. One thing to note when teaching students who are learning English as a second language is that these students might not have full confidence in their ability to get their ideas across through language alone. So by having something to supplement that, they may be more willing to participate. I mean, I know when I was in China, there were times when I definitely wasn't confident in my language ability, so I understand where they're coming from. Even in the tutoring sessions with Coco, she seemed much more willing to make mistakes and just participate whenever we could use drawing to bridge any learning gaps. Another thing that can help students who are learning English as a second language is art, because it not only helps them to be understood better, but it helps them to learn the material better as well. For example, these students might not be auditory learners because English is their second language. It's a little harder. However, reaching out to them through visual and kinesthetic means might prove more effective. And art can do this because it's more hands-on and it by nature involves visuals. This will not only benefit students who are learning English as a second language, but also benefit all students in the classroom because all students have their own learning preferences. On another note, students who are learning English as a second language may find it difficult to communicate with their peers, but by having art in the classroom, they can better express their ideas and communicate with their peers. This can lead to a more welcoming classroom environment, and it can also help students turn from classmates to friends, even with a language barrier. According to a study I read recently, students who are learning English as a second language may be placed in English-speaking classrooms too soon, without an English as a second language teacher to guide them. This can result in them struggling academically and socially. But according to this study, students may be able to better adapt if there's art in the classroom. I want you all to imagine if you were placed in a classroom that was being taught in a language that was not your primary language. Think about how difficult going to school would become. If there was something to help you better express your ideas, wouldn't your time there be a little bit easier? That's what we need to see in today's classrooms, an integration of art to provide support for English language learners. 谢谢. Thank you.